Another area of asset management and protection of our information comes from the area of software licensing. Software is often protected via copyright. It depends a lot on which jurisdiction or which country we are in as to the type of protection we can provide for software. Some countries will allow it to be protected through copyright, and some might even allow it to be protected through patent. However, we see in the protection of software, it's often not the software itself that's protected. Rather, it's the logic used in the execution of that software. So that if a person took a program that was written, say a financial system, and they rewrote it in another language, it would still be protected because the logic or flow was the same, even though it's in a different programming language and looks substantially different. The problem with software protection is that enforcement is difficult. It means in some cases having to reverse engineer a product that was written by somebody else, which is a copy of our product. It also can be that the enforcement of these provisions can be difficult to gain any type of a satisfactory resolution, and it's often not consistent in how this is actually applied. One of the things that comes in here is the idea of first sale. Now, first sale is something we are all familiar with. If you bought, for example, a piece of furniture, you bought a nice chair for your sitting room, and you decide after a few years that you're moving to a different place and, yeah, this chair doesn't fit in so well, you can turn around and you can resell that chair maybe to somebody else. You have the right, because you purchased it, to now sell it on to somebody else. But we can't do that with software. If I've bought software, I can't turn around and say, oh, I have this and here you can have this copy. Why is that? It's because most software vendors don't actually sell you the software. Instead, they license it to you. They give you permission to use it according to a license. Therefore, they are able to avoid this promise of first sale where a person can take software they have and sell it on to another party or redistribute it. Another concept that comes in here is the concept of fair use. Fair use is where you could buy a product and now you could make modifications so you can use it in the way you would like to use it. This is another area where some software vendors have tried to prevent this. If you buy a product, you must use it in the configuration and style in which it was delivered to you. You are not able to make modifications to that product. We also have here the concept then, instead of copyright, copyleft. Now, copyleft is where a person grants the ability for a product to be redistributed freely, as long as they place those same conditions on the recipient. I'm giving you this for free, so you must always be willing to provide it to others for free, and not to resell it or try to make money from it. And we have organizations that do this quite routinely. They'll have analysis and data they have gathered. They'll pass it out as a free distribution, but the people who receive it cannot then turn around and sell it. No, it's part of a copyleft, allowing for free redistribution, but enforcing those same conditions under which the original recipient received it upon further recipients. One of the things we always have to watch for is this problem of software piracy. And this is a little bit difficult because quite often we turn around and we might buy software, but do we track the licenses? Are we sure that we are not using more licenses than we've paid for? Or are we sure that if somebody challenged us and said, okay, how many licenses do you have? Do we even have a record? We do not want to be found guilty or suspect of the illegal copying, use, or distribution of software. Now, there's a lot of debate about this. If I have a copy on my primary desktop, can I have a backup copy in case I have desktop failure? Well, then I have two copies. Is that allowed? This is where we have to check things like the end user license agreement that allows us to have copies for archive or backup. Let's say you have a desktop in the office, but sometimes when you're on the road, you have a laptop. Do you have to have a separate license for your laptop than you do for your desktop? And this is something we have to look at. What are the provisions for use of software on multiple devices? If, for example, I have one license and I'm only ever using one device or the other at any one time, well, wouldn't one license be good enough? But this is again where we have to check. What are the provisions under the end user license agreement we agreed to when we download or purchase that software? When it comes to the area of licensing, as organizations, we need to practice careful licensing practices so that we have, for one, a way to track our licenses so that one, you don't buy too many and you don't buy too few. The problem always can be that an organization has bought 100 licenses, but they don't even know how many are in use and which ones are in use at any one time. They end up buying more licenses when they have ones they have never used. Or it could easily be they bought 100 licenses and they haven't tracked it carefully, and after a little while, they find they're actually running it on 130 different machines. So this tracking of licenses, often through some type of automated process, is a very good way to ensure that we are complying with licensing terms. We also have to make sure that if we bought a license, say for example, we bought an academic copy of software, we should not be using that in a commercial setting. If we had a 30-day free trial, we shouldn't use it past that time period. So complying with the licensing terms is also important. When it comes to enforcement of software licensing, many software vendors will try to control the improper distribution of software through things like serial numbers. You have to enter in a serial number of that licensed version. Maybe you have a little key fob that you have to plug in. Maybe it's on a USB, and you can only use that software if that key fob is plugged into your laptop at that time. The other is, we see this especially with the 30-day free trials, the use of cookies, where a cookie will register on our system when the start date of that free trial was and when it's expired. The other idea is we see here today a lot of use of remote authentication. A person tries to use software, and it could well be that using identity as a service and other forms of authentication, it goes and checks to see if that is a licensed version before it allows the person to use it. And we see this especially in the cloud today, where with software as a service, that is something being managed by the software as a service provider. They check a person's license. Say, are you allowed to be on this system? Have you exceeded your number of allowable licenses? And so on. The key points to review here. We need to have policy that addresses this whole area of intellectual property protection. That includes things like the retention, the deletion of our systems, the deletion of things like software. What do I do when that software is no longer needed? What do I do when that piece of hardware is to be then disposed of? Does it still have software on it? And there we need procedures to help us to enforce the intent of the policy that says we will practice good licensing and ensure we do not become guilty of things like software piracy. We need to also audit and review to ensure we are compliant with the various policies and procedures and licensing agreements we have in place.